Welcome. So what's going on, guys? My name is Epic Hobbit, and today I'm here to show you my Terraria 1.2.3 top 10 weapons in the game. But before I begin, I'd like to just mention a few honorable mentions. These weapons are really good, but in my opinion, just short of the top 10. They are the Stake Launcher, the Magnet Sphere, the Golden Shower, the Death Sickle, the Inferno Fork, the Scepter Staff, and the Shadow Beam Staff. All 7 of those weapons are excellent, and I think great weapons that could compete with practically any boss, but just short of the top 10. Now, just before we begin, I have one last honorable mention. The Coin Gun. Using platinum coins is the best weapon in the game, and has the highest DPS, but using silver or copper coins, it can't really compete with the top 10 weapons. Therefore, it's up to you to decide if this weapon should be on the top 10 or not. That's because, in terms of efficiency, it's terrible. And it's impractical to think that we could have enough platinum coins to fuel this weapon without using cheats or hacks. On the other side, if you don't feel like this weapon should be based on how practical it is, then hey, it's easily a top 10, maybe a number 1. So you guys have to decide on that one. Now get ready for the Terraria 1.2.3 top 10 weapons in the game. The Terra Blade. The pros of this weapon is that it fires a ranged projectile with each shot that can pierce up to 3 enemies. Plus, its velocity of 12 and use time of 15 are both very good. And its high damage makes it the most powerful sword in the game. On the con side, this weapon doesn't have auto turn, making it very tough to fire off enough projectiles to finish off powerful hordes of mobs and powerful bosses. Paladin's Hammer. On the pro side, this weapon has 90 base damage, and its velocity and use time make it the most rapid and fast boomerang in the game. Not to mention it goes through all enemies in its path until it reaches its range or it hits a wall. On the con side, however, this weapon doesn't have auto turn, meaning you have to constantly click, and its range is terrible, so you have to get in really close with bosses that you'd rather stay away from. The Bat Scepter. On the pro side, this weapon's mana cost is virtually inexistent, and its velocity and use time are both very good. In addition, you don't have to rapidly click to fire off projectiles, and with each shot it fires 1 to 3 projectiles that home in on the enemies. On the con side, however, this weapon is useless underwater and no projectiles are fired. In addition, its damage is a bit low, so it's tough to get the job done in many cases. The Candy Corn Rifle. On the pro side, this weapon has a 33% chance not to consume ammo, and in addition, the candy corn projectiles it fires can penetrate multiple enemies and ricochet up to 4 times. Furthermore, its insane velocity and use time give this weapon the highest DPS of any ranged weapon obtainable in-game. On the con side, however, this weapon's projectiles are affected by gravity and don't do too much damage. The Vampire Knives. On the pro side, this weapon fires 4 to 8 projectiles per shot, and its velocity and use time are both pretty good. Not to mention, you can just hold down on the mouse button instead of having to click repeatedly, so that you'll be able to get off shots more rapidly. Furthermore, it has a unique life-stealing ability in which for each projectile that hits the enemies, you'll gain some life back. On the con side, however, this weapon's damage and knockback are both very low. The Chain Gun. On the pro side, this weapon has insane use time and velocity, which make up for its low damage and knockback, and it has a 50% chance not to consume ammo. On the con side, however, its bullets fire everywhere and are very inaccurate. This can be corrected though by using glorified bullets, which have homing capabilities. The Blizzard Staff. On the pro side, this weapon's damage, velocity, and use time are all very good. Furthermore, it can hit any target on the map as long as you point the cursor at them, even if there's a wall separating you from them. On the con side, however, there is an exception to this rule. If the enemy you're shooting for is underneath a roof, the icicle projectiles will hit the roof instead of the enemy. Furthermore, its mana cost is very high, so you have to have a lot of mana potions if you really want to use this weapon. The Horseman's Blade. On the pro side, this weapon's amazing damage makes it one of the most powerful swords in the game, and because it has auto turn, it can get off rapid shots. Not to mention, it summons pumpkin heads each time you hit the enemy, each doing as much damage as the sword itself, allowing for insane amounts of damage. On the con side, however, you can only summon the pumpkin heads by hitting the enemy with the sword, meaning that you have to get right up close and personal with powerful bosses in order to get the true effect. The North Pole. On the pro side, this weapon's damage and velocity are both great, and in addition, with each shot, it fires an icy trail of projectiles that do a ton of damage to the enemies. Furthermore, when firing these projectiles directly upwards and at a rapid pace, they'll fall right back down and do a ton of concentrated damage. When done correctly, this has the highest DPS of any weapon in the game. On the con side, however, this weapon has a bad use time, and in addition, you have to click rapidly instead of leaving the mouse button down. The Razorpine. On the pro side, this weapon's velocity and use time are both very good, making up for its relatively low damage. Furthermore, it fires 2 to 4 projectiles per tick, and its mana cost is only 5. On the con side, however, the needles it fires do not pierce targets and are affected by gravity. Still though, this weapon is excellent, and is the #1 weapon in Terraria 1.2.3.